So our next speaker is Dr. Eric Bricker. He's the founder of AHealthcareZ. Many of you must have seen his videos on LinkedIn, some amazing information that he shares. So he is founder of AHealthcareZ and Texas Family Insurance, which is an independent individual and family health insurance brokerage, a division of AHealthcareZ. And he provides 200 plus healthcare videos. Dr. Bricker is an internal medicine physician and former co-founder and chief medical officer of Compass Professional Health Services. Compass is a healthcare navigation service, which was acquired by Allied Solutions. Welcome, Dr. Eric Bricker. I will show your presentation.
Yep, I can see it. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, we had originally planned for me to be in the car, but fortunately I am home and I'm not driving, but we're still gonna Yuli's gonna man the slides while I talk.
I thought you will have that whiteboard behind you when you
Well,
talk.
I'm in the same room. I can swing the camera around if you want to do it that
I love that. Yeah, I love that when you show the
to.
board and draw on it. Like reminds me, okay, at least in Zoom also we can do, classroom.
I've actually given talks where people are like, you have to do it in front of the whiteboard. We won't let you talk unless you do it in front of the whiteboard. So listen, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about employee benefits in 20 minutes. Of course, that's humanly impossible, but I'm going to try my best. So listen, thank you so much to Yuli and everybody for being here. This is honestly, I'm not involved with physician entrepreneurs at all. So this is super exciting for me because I've never been involved with physician entrepreneurs before. So just a little bit about myself. So I graduated from college in '98 when managed care and HMOs were all the rage. And I don't have any doctors in my family. Every doctor I talked to said, whatever you do, don't become a physician because of all the bureaucracy, right? The bureaucracy was bad in 1998. Little did we know how much worse it was going to get. So I became a hospital finance consultant. So I actually worked in the billing and business office of major medical centers, University of Kansas, Cleveland Clinic, Yale Associated Hospital. So I was a consulting finance guy, cranking Excel spreadsheets for a couple of years, but still wanted to be a doctor. So went to the University of Illinois. Look, it's University of Illinois is all over this group tonight. It's fantastic. Did my residency at Hopkins in Baltimore, worked as a hospitalist at Baylor, Scott and White Healthcare System, and Plano, which is a suburb of Dallas. And then actually, while I was in residency at Hopkins, I co-founded Compass Professional Health Services with one of my colleagues from the healthcare consulting firm that I was at, plus our technology guy. And Compass is a patient navigation firm. We started in 2007, and we tried to raise venture capital. We were completely unsuccessful. So, because it was the Great Recession, you couldn't, if you had an idea to print money, they wouldn't give you anything to fund that. So we just bootstrapped the business. And we grew it the old-fashioned way where we charged our customers money and then they paid us, and then we used retained earnings to grow the business. And so we grew it to 2,000 employer clients. And it really kind of was the patient navigation or concierge or advocacy service. We called them Compass Health Pros that were on the phone, or we had an app, or you could email or text with them. And our company grew to about 300 employees. We had about 2,000 employer clients. It was about 1.8 million people across those 2,000 employer clients. Some household names were like Southwest Airlines, T-Mobile, Chili's, Maggiano's restaurants. As the quote unquote chief medical officer, I was like the sales guy. So literally all I did for 11 years, from 2007 until 2018, when we sold the business, was meet with brokers, benefit consultants, HR, CFOs, yada, yada, yada. So this presentation is 11 years of what I did. And of course I went in as a physician knowing nothing. So hopefully you guys can learn from the gazillions of mistakes that I made. And then we got bought by this company called Allied Solutions, which actually is ex-Hewitt. So the big insurance brokerage, Aon, bought Hewitt 15 years ago. And, Hewitt was a Fortune 500 company on its own. And then they spun out their HR outsourcing benefits administration platform, sold it to the private equity firm Blackstone, and then Blackstone renamed it Alight. So Alight's got 10,000 employees. It's been around. I mean, all the employees there consider themselves Hewitt employees. So we got bought by them. And I'm like, okay, I'm in my mid 40s. I'm not going to play golf for the rest of my life. So I'm like, well, I still saw so much confusion and frustration. Let me kind of create these healthcare finance videos to educate people essentially about how they're being taken advantage of. You know, it's really hard to sell a healthcare solution or a digital health solution or anything to an employer that doesn't really understand that they're kind of getting screwed over. So I wanted to make these videos to kind of educate people, and I'm not really beholden to anybody, so I could shoot people straight. So that's what AHealthcareZ is. And then just because of COVID and I saw everybody losing their job, that I was like, well, their income's going to be going down. They're going to be losing their employer-sponsored health insurance. I'm just going to go out. I'm going to get my insurance license so I can sell people Obamacare plans. I mean, I'm here in Texas. We have the highest number of uninsured people in America. So I started selling Obamacare plans. So that's all that is. It's just Texas Family Insurance is me selling Obamacare. So next slide, please. So that's a little bit about myself. Now, topics we're going to go over. So thank you to David for the fantastic presentation before. We're going to go over fully insured versus self-funded, broker consultant segmentation by employer size, segmentation by geography, segmentation by industry, how broker consultants are structured. And the whole point of this is for if you or your startup, et cetera, are interested in going to the employer market as like who you're going to sell to, like who's going to pay you, right? So in healthcare, I kind of feel like you're either on the provider side or the payer side, and they got, there's a little bit of intermingling, but at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, you're just going to do something like that, immune allergy thing at the beginning, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. Or you're going to do something kind of on the payer side. You kind of have to kind of pick one of the two. There's nothing wrong with that. But I was on the payer side, and we approach that through employers. So this is for people that are on the payer side who want employers to write them checks and pay them money. So next slide, please. So, and I've made videos about all these topics on AHealthcareZ if you want to learn about them. So, okay, so fully insured versus self-funded, just to quickly go over that. So if you're fully insured, you pay your monthly premium to a major health insurer, which is the Blue Cross, United, Cigna, or Aetna, Humana, because we've got people in California. Yes, you've got Kaiser there, but they're only in Colorado, DC, and Atlanta outside of California. And so they're called BUCA. B-U-C-A is kind of what they're abbreviated as. You hear people say BUCA. There's going to be a lot of jargon in this talk, but that's important for you to be able to talk the talk when you're talking HR and employee benefits with people, that you can use the jargon with these folks. You're not going to get any access to claims data, so there's some solutions that require access to claims data. You cannot do that with a fully insured group. The carrier will not give it to you. It's integrated claims adjudication network, the PBM. You can't split out any of this stuff. It's the whole shebang. So in other words, if you got United, they're going to be adjudicating your claims. You're going to get OptumRx. You're going to use the United network. You can't mix or match anything. Premium, you can do the math real easy in your head. The average per employee cost is $10,000 per employee per year. Now that's per employee on the plan. Okay, so typically a company will have let's just say 120 employees, but only 100 will be on the plan. And then those 100 employees, some will be single, some will be employee plus spouse, some will be employee plus spouse and dependents, et cetera, et cetera. But when you average it all out, so the single employees, they're only like $6,000, the whole families end up like $20,000. So when you average it all out, it comes out to about, on average, $10,000 per employee per year. So it's really easy to do the math. So anytime you're trying to figure out an employer's healthcare spend, and that's medical and RX, you just take the number of employees that are on the plan, you multiply by 10,000. So for every 100 employees on the plan, it's $1 million. So it's the math is pretty simple. And that way in your head, you never even have to ask a group what their spend is, because you just have to ask them how many employees are on the plan and you'll immediately know what it is. Okay, so for then self-funded is where the employer pays the claims. So what they do is they set aside a budget and they literally give permission to the carrier, the TPA, to wire money out of their account to pay St. Mary's, St. Jude, St. whoever, Dr. Joe, Dr. Elaine, whoever, right? Now, they will typically have what's referred to as stop-loss insurance for very large claimants. So if they have a premature baby that costs $1 million, they've got, what's called stop-loss insurance for that particular situation. And then they've got aggregate stop-loss insurance that if their total claims goes above $750,000, $1 million, $2 million, that the aggregate, but aggregate insurance is super cheap. You usually don't hit the aggregate. The specific stop loss for those individuals that have catastrophic bills that's the really expensive stop loss insurance that they'll have. You get some access to claims data. If you are self-funded, the carriers still will give you a hard time about giving you the data, even though it's quote unquote your data. Cigna is probably the worst about it. And the Blues plans are kind of all over the place. United typically has what they refer to as a disease management data set that they're willing to share. It doesn't necessarily have all the fields you want. So just know that if your solution requires data, even the claims data, it's kind of iffy. It's not fantastic. And it's super delayed. You're going to be getting stuff and you're like, oh, great. The newest data I can get is from like 6 months ago. And they'll say it's more timely. Of course, they'll tell you great things up front, but then when you actually see it, it's a mess. So claims adjudication, so actually processing the claims, that's what claims adjudication is. You can have that done by Blue Cross United, Cigna, Aetna, or you can hire a separate, what's called a TPA, which tends to be a small, like you there in San Francisco, like Collective Health is a TPA, right? But then there's also TPAs have been around for forever, since the 70s. So there's like one called Group and Pension Administrators here in Dallas. So they'll administer the claims, adjudicate the claims. Then you get the network. And the Blue Cross and United do not let their networks be rented. If you want to use United's network, you got to use UMR, which is a TPA that United owns, or United. If you want to use Blue Cross's network, you got to use one of the Blue Cross plans. Blue Cross of Texas, because that's where we are, okay? But interestingly, Aetna and Cigna actually rent out their network to one of these TPAs. So if you want to use a TPA and then rent either Aetna's or Cigna's network, you can do that. And there's something else that's called PHCS multi-plan, which kind of has credit discounts, but you can have some other options there too. First Health also kind of credit discounts. So then the PBM, you can carve it out. So this is where you're like, hey, I want to have, United as my carrier, and I want to have as adjudicating my claims, and I want to have United's network. But Optum Rx is terrible. I'm not saying they're terrible. I'm just saying other people have told me they're terrible. And they're like, there's no way in the world that I'm going to use Optum Rx. And they're like, I want to use CVS, Caremark. So like, okay, you can do that, right? When you're self-funded, you can kind of mix and match these things. And then when the major carrier, Blue Cross United, Cigna, Aetna, is performing these services for you, it's referred to as ASO, Administrative Services Only. So they're only charging like $35 per employee per month for their ASO services. So you're talking like, what's that, like $350? So you're talking like $425 per employee per year versus the $10,000 per employee per year, because the employer is taking all the risk on the claims. So you can see why self-funding is much more efficient. Basically, being fully insured is easy and it's wasteful. Okay, the insurance carrier makes so much more money off an employer when they're fully insured that they do whatever they can to not let them be self-funded. Because when you're self-funded, then you save so much money. Yeah, it's choppy. You got good years and bad years, but on the whole, you're going to be saving anywhere from 5 to 15% for a variety of reasons. Okay, next slide. Okay, more than you want to know about self-funded, fully insured. Okay, the employee benefits world is not homogenous. It is not a monolith. And so really the main point I want you to know today is that employee benefits is very different depending upon the segment. And we're going to talk about different segmentations. Okay, one, jumbo. So it's kind of a colloquial term, but that's what they actually call it. Those are companies with more than 100,000 employees. And these employee counts, there's no hard and fast rule. Okay, these are general numbers. Okay, so jumbo employers are like CalPERS, like California employees, or like Walmart. Okay, and so at those companies, they have entire huge employee benefits departments. They make their decisions independently. They're always self-funded, and they oftentimes are very, like Walmart is very quote unquote innovative with what they do with their healthcare, because they spend over $1 billion a year on healthcare. So it's a huge budget for them. So they're the champagne drinkers. They are aficionados when it comes to healthcare. When I'm talking about David's point about understanding purchasing, if anybody understands purchasing, there's a problem with jumbos. There's not very many of them, right? If you look at the stratification of the number of employers in America with more than 100,000 people, if you're a salesperson and you're only going after companies with more than 100,000 people, you don't have that many groups to call on. It's just a small list, right? So yeah, everybody wants to bag an elephant, but there's just not a lot of them. Okay, next you have large market, which is 2,000 to 100,000 employees. So here, they'll typically have an internal benefits team of anywhere from 2 to 10 employees. They will be self-funded as well, but their decisions will be made in conjunction with a benefit consultant. And we'll talk about the specific benefit consulting firms like Mercer and Aon and some of the other ones, but they will still very much kind of do decisions in conjunction with their consultant. So Walmart does whatever Walmart wants to do. Disney does whatever Disney wants to do. CalPERS does whatever CalPERS wants to do. These large market folks, they're like, What do you think, Aon? What should we do? So being involved with a consultant for those size groups is super important. And then this is really, if you're selling to employers, this is really the sweet spot, which is the mid-market, which is between 100 and 2,000 employees, because if you can find, and obviously with all these groups, there's early adopters. So you could have, so I would argue like somebody like ExxonMobil is not an early adopter when it comes to health benefits, but like Walmart is. Right. So you got to find these early adopters, the whole Jeffrey Moore technology adoption life cycle, yada, yada, yada. You got to find those early adopters in the mid-market. And the reason why the mid-market is so great is because really to implement any significant change in employee benefits, the HR person and the CFO actually can't be involved because the HR person, frankly, is so scared of being fired that they're never going to do anything like different or unique. And the CFO is like, I don't care about healthcare. I just care about hitting the numbers. Right. And so it really takes the CEO, and in large market and jumbo employers, there's so much bureaucracy that you can't get to the CEO. But in a company with 100 to 2,000 employees, you can get to the CEO. I've had gazillions of meetings. All I did for 11 years is meet with these companies. And I met with tons of CEOs in the mid-market, and you can get to them. And if you can get to them, then you can get to the real decision maker. And we're talking 100 employees, that's $1 million budget. 2,000 employees, that's a $20 million budget. So, I mean, these are significant numbers that they're talking about. And then, of course, for your fee, you can make a decent fee off of that size employer group. So they're really the sweet spot. It's a combination of fully insured and self-funded. The important thing to understand about fully insured groups over 100 is that they are not community rated, but are fully credible. And what that means is that their renewal for their new premium for the next year is a reflection on their claims experience of the previous year. In other words, their premium in 2021 is just their total claims from 2020 plus 15%. That I just taught you how to be an actuary for an insurance company. That's literally all they do, is they just say, okay, this is your claims last year. We'll add on 15 to 20%. They'll typically add on like 25 to 30% so that they can negotiate you down to only 15% more. But like, that's how they do it. So fully insured groups with more than 100 employees are actually very interested in controlling their claims costs because their premiums are a direct reflection of their own group's claims costs. In most states, groups under 100 or under 50 are what's called community rated, which means that they just throw all the employers into a pile. So if one employer does a really good job, they're not going to see it in their premiums. Okay, and then you got small group as well. There you have an HR generalist or no HR at all. And the important thing to know about small group is a lot of times they have what's called a PEO, which is a professional employee organization, which means that like payroll, benefits, everything is outsourced to another company like TriNet. So you can do a lot of good work in small group, but a lot of times who you want to engage with is the PEO, not the individual employer. Not always though. We did a ton of small group business at Compass. All right, next up, please. So that's segmentation by size. Now we're going to be segmentation by geographic regions. The United States is not the same when it comes to employee benefits. It's very different across the country. And I will say that the West Coast is really the outlier. Okay, so I know we have people from all over the country, but we've got a fair number of folks in California. Just know that the way things, and it's not that good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying the way benefits are in California is very different from the rest of the country because you have a lot of HMOs in California and the rest of America, frankly, does not. In the South, there's like almost zero. So just know that entire model, whether it be a staff model HMO or a contract model HMO, like that really does not exist in other places in America. Yeah, there's a handful, like I said, there's a handful of Kaiser and Denver, DC, and Atlanta, but most other places it really does not exist. Okay, and guess what? Because of all those HMOs in California, your healthcare costs are also much lower than the rest of America. It says they can't see the screen. Yuli, maybe you could help me out with that. Now in the South, and I'll just say that's from south of the Mason-Dixon line to El Paso, if you draw a diagonal line and everything down and to the right. Texas, Florida, Atlanta, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, you get it, okay? Almost everybody's got a PPO and it's very high healthcare costs, okay? So, it's, red states, freedom, we like choice. We don't want anybody telling us what to do. In the Northeast, which I'll say is Philadelphia and up to Boston, is generally very low deductibles. In fact, in Massachusetts, They call their health insurance plans deductible and no deductible plans, because believe it or not, in the state of Massachusetts, almost half of their health insurance plans have zero deductible. So if your solution involves employee out-of-pocket costs, just know that employee out-of-pocket costs in Massachusetts are not nearly as big of an issue as again, I'm not making a judgment. I'm not saying that's good or bad or what have you. I'm just saying that it's very different in that environment vis-a-vis other environments. Same thing in New York City, they tend to have very low deductible PPO plans. We're talking, $250, $500, I'll even say $1,000 is low these days. In the South, it's $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 individual deductibles for that amount. So there's much more cost sharing in the South. And then the Midwest is very similar to the South in terms of there being large numbers of PPOs, and they just have a huge Rust Belt manufacturing problem. So they got a ton of low margin businesses, and they've got a ton of businesses that are not doing well financially. So they have a lot of financial pressure, and they also have a lot of population pressure where they have people leaving, young people leaving. So their plans are losing the young, healthy people, and all the old, sicker people are staying in Michigan and Illinois and Wisconsin and all these places. So demographically, the Midwest is hurting a lot. So in other words, the greatest pain from a financial standpoint is really in the South and the Midwest. And that's exactly where Compass sold almost all of our business. Next slide. Okay, now by industry. So as David pointed out, right, so they're like, look, healthcare, the famous quote from GM, they spend more on healthcare than they do on steel for their cars, right? So cost is a priority. Who's cost a priority for? Number one, it's actually municipalities and schools. And that's why you've seen places like the state of Montana and the state of North Carolina, and even CalPERS for that matter, with their reference-based pricing on the joints, like they can't increase their revenue, right? Their revenue is tax revenue. So they're kind of stuck. And so if there's anybody who's really financially motivated, now here's the thing. If it is in a state that has a large public employee union, then your hands are tied much more, because the union's going to be like, don't you dare do anything with our benefits. We want $0 copays or $2 copays or whatever. Don't you dare mess with it. So if you go to a state that doesn't have a public employee union, but has a budget problem, or a municipality, we did a ton of municipalities and schools at Compass, ton of municipalities in the South. Okay, next up, manufacturing, because it's a low margin business. Probably the best book ever written about employee healthcare is called The Company That Solved Healthcare by John Torinus, Torinus. He was the CEO of Serigraph that makes dashboards for cars and trucks. They're based in Wisconsin, so they sell them to GM and Ford and Chrysler. And he's like, look, our company's margin is 6%. So if we can do something about our healthcare, that's a huge deal. Okay, same thing with grocery store, right? Grocery store margins are 3%, right? Hospitality and retail tend to have very low margins. But the problem with retail and hospitality from a healthcare perspective, they have super high employee turnover, right? So if you talk about investing in the employees for the future, like the employees are going to be gone. We had a company, a retail employer that had 80% turnover per year. I mean, it was unreal. So just know that. And then they have a ton of part-time workers, like at Walmart. Walmart has hundreds of thousands of employees that are part-time that they don't give benefits to. So just know that you've got to take that into account. Okay, the other goal of an employer is to attract and retain employees, and this is the whole like Bay Area, San Francisco thing, yada yada. Other places too. Boston's a lot like this. Again, I'm not judging it. It's like good, bad, or indifferent. But here, it's like, look, their margins are like 60%. So like money is not the issue. The issue is they just need to attract and retain employees. They need to keep their employees healthy. They need to keep them working. They need to keep their families healthy so that they're not distracted, so they can keep working, creating more lines of code. So that's a big deal from an attracting and retaining employees perspective. Same thing for professional services, law firms, accounting firms, banking. So we actually had a ton of these customers as well. So just know that you can actually have a ton of customers in the employee benefits if you're not really a cost containment solution, but you're more employee health, attract and retain, et cetera, et cetera. You can do that, but you just have to go after the right market segment. Okay, that brings up the interesting question. What about construction and energy? It's all over the place, right? If it's high oil prices or low oil prices, they're all over the map. Healthcare itself, I would tread very lightly, right? So hospitals and large physician groups, pharma, med device companies, they're very large employers, especially the hospital. They're very, as you can imagine, they're very touchy about healthcare for their employees. It's very political. So if anything, you might actually want to stay away from hospitals as much as you can, because they're not going to make rational decisions when it comes to healthcare. They're going to make political decisions when it comes to healthcare. Okay, next slide. I'm probably way over. Do I need to stop?
I think we are enjoying this. So we'll.
Okay. By the way, I live on an 11-acre farm all around outside of Dallas. So all these are pictures from my farm in my neighborhood. So I hope we are enjoying that. So no high-tech photos here. We got a very rustic approach. Okay, now we got to know how brokers and consultants are actually structured. So like I said, the national consultants, the really big ones that work with the jumbos and the large employers, that's Mercer and Aon. Okay, and Aon is just gobbling up stuff left and right. So Aon, like I said, it bought Hewitt, and then it bought Willis Towers Watson, and Willis Towers Watson was when Willis bought Towers Watson, and Towers Watson was when Towers Perrin merged with Watson Wyatt Worldwide. So there's been huge consolidation on the national consulting side in an attempt to frankly put more leverage on their customers and squeeze more fees out of them because they got less choice. Okay, but then there's keep in mind, and then there's insurance brokerages. Now keep in mind, there are many large and jumbo employers that do not use Mercer and Aon. So you don't have to. In fact, we didn't have any clients with Mercer and Aon. Like they never brought us business. We would go direct to those jumbos and large employers, but we never partnered with Mercer and Aon. Okay, so you can be successful and not have to do that. All right. Now, insurance brokerages, you have to remember, not only do employee benefits, but they also do property and casualty. So just know that the people that work at a brokerage have two completely separate business. They're doing like cybersecurity insurance. They're doing like hail insurance for a used car lot. I mean, they're doing a ton of other different types of insurance for businesses. And those are different people. They're literally totally different side of the business. And then they're the employee benefits people that do the healthcare. Okay, the big national brokerages are, so people probably heard of Marsh McLennan, right? Marsh McLennan is the largest insurance brokerage in America. They own Mercer, but they also own a brokerage that does the mid-market and the small group called MMA, Marsh McLennan Associates, okay? And then AJG is Arthur J. Gallagher out by O'Hare Airport in Itasca, Illinois, but they're across the country. Brown & Brown and Hayes have recently merged, or Brown & Brown bought Hayes. Hub, USI, Alliant, Locked in, Assured Partners, NFP, Epic, Digital Insurance, CBiz, Holmes Murphy, Woodruff Sawyer, based there in San Francisco. We had a fair number of clients with them, and more. These companies typically do over $100 million a year in revenue. They'll probably do somewhere between $2 billion and $4 billion a year in premium across all their customers, and they are your golden ticket to the mid-market and large group, because the mid-market and large group is looking to their broker to bring them solutions, because they're kind of, HR is a cost center. Employers never staff it appropriately, so they're way understaffed. And so they're looking for their broker consultant to bring them innovative solutions. So like the number one thing that you need to do is you need to go on LinkedIn and you need to search up who in your network is a second or third degree connection with people at each one of these companies. And then you need to call and email them. And literally that's what I did. I'm one of, there's probably other people that do it, but I actually cold called people. They thought it was kind of funny when a doctor was cold calling them. But like literally you have to do that. And it works. I mean, you have to be very persistent, and I got hung up on all the time, but it totally works. And the way that those brokers are structured is it's not a team. Okay. It's totally eat what you kill. So they don't share each other's money. They charge their customers money, and the broker themselves keeps 40 to 50% of it, and 50% of it goes to the kitty, and they don't get any base salary. So it's all eat what you kill. So they don't cooperate with their colleagues. They're individual fiefdoms, not only by office. So like the Chicago office of USI doesn't cooperate with the Dallas office of USI. Like they don't cooperate at all. Okay. But even within that office, Joe broker versus Jane broker versus Steve broker, they don't cooperate with each other either. Okay. Now they typically have 1 to 5 account managers that works underneath them. They're like the doers to the broker. The broker's kind of like, let me take you fishing and hunting, and it's a relationship-based business. But oftentimes it's the account managers that do the work. So when you sell, you actually want to cold call account managers, because there's many groups where it's really the account manager that runs the show and not the broker or the producer. And typically a broker, if you want to do the math, if you're like running the numbers on your pipeline, a broker will typically have between 10 and 100 clients. They'll have 10 clients if they're big. They'll have like 10,000 person clients, and they'll have many more clients if they're smaller. And I could go on and on forever, but let me just go to the next slide before I bore you folks to tears. You guys have been very kind to let me go through all this with you. And so here are the take-home points, okay? Employer healthcare sales is heavily channel driven through the broker consultant, especially for the mid-market. That is the soft underbelly of where you want to go, okay? It is not a monolith. So everyone talks about minimal viable product, the MVP, okay? But if you're selling to employers, your ideal client profile is super important, because there are so many healthcare startups calling on employers that they literally cannot talk to all of them. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of healthcare startups call them constantly. And so you have to be very targeted in your ideal client profile, because I guarantee you, your solution will not appeal to everybody. You don't want to try to appeal to everybody. You need to be like, look, we are perfect for municipalities in the Midwest. And then you just get in front of every single municipality in the Midwest. And niche, again, Jeffrey Moore is like, we literally just followed everything in Jeffrey Moore's books. And it allowed us to grow from 3 to 300 employees in 11 years. So that's it. I guess the next slide is my contact information, and if you got any questions. So connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And then there's my email address as well. And then if you got any questions.
Thank you, Eric. This is a great presentation, and we have some questions. Only thing I was thinking while I was listening to this is, now I know why Heaven failed. The Heaven created by Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, and Jamie Dimon. They failed because they didn't take Eric Brickler as their main guy.
Well, listen, I'm Noah Toolgawande, so I'm pretty sure I would have failed 10 times faster.
They should have taken you to really make that happen. Paula had been writing a lot of questions. Paula, you want to ask her a question?
Yeah, I really enjoyed both the presentations. So my experience with UberDoc, when we started, employee benefit brokers found us because we're a direct access, direct pay platform, transparent through the health savings account. They said, you build it, we will come. There's something called dollar loss ratio. The idea that those mid-level employers, if they don't have utilization, they get to bargain for a lower insurance rate the following year. So with a cash model, those encounters are off the grid. So they were really fascinated. And so we have been kind of like building this network. And so I'm just curious, as with COVID and all the remote, access, and we have so many employees now so far from where their employers are located, that this, this newer model might actually have some legs, where you have, people having more choice, empower the patient to say, here, use your HSA, don't use your car insurance for your oil change, right? Pay out of pocket for that small stuff, use your insurance for when you really need it. And they, and we're kind of like seeing this kind of this switch over to a new kind of utilization. And I'm wondering if you're seeing that at your level, or is it still kind of like everyone's just trying to pay as much as they can, sell as much as they can. And even though they say they want to lower cost has never been lowered, right? Insurance rates have never gone down.
Yeah, and that is, so it's a great point. And that was really the role of the consumer-directed health plan with the HSA or the HRA, the health reimbursement arrangement. And listen, and it has its downsides, but from a people acting like, quote unquote consumers for the little stuff, right? Not insurance for oil changes. You actually acted like a consumer for oil changes, just like you are an actual consumer for oil changes when it came to like shopping for MRIs or what have you. And it totally works. And people have been doing it in consumer directed health plans. Their highest utilization is in the South and in the Midwest. And so frankly, the Northeast is just kind of catching on to it now. But they've been doing the quote unquote father of the HSA is this guy, John Goodman. He's here in Dallas, but they've been doing this in the South for 10 years, 15 years. And it's slowly been moving its way to the coasts.
Yeah, Dr. Bricker, do you know what what percentage of HSAs are funded at all? You know, what percentage of people that have access to HSAs actually start to fund them?
Oh, I don't know. It's the number of people in commercially insured plans that are on a qualified high deductible health plan with an HSA or an HRA is it's about 35%. So PPOs are still the highest. They're about 45%. And then CDHPs are the next highest. Now, keep in mind, I'll be honest with you, that the way that most employers went was the HRA route, not the HSA route. And the reason for that is because if you give the employee money with an HSA and they either quit or they get fired, they take the money with them. Whereas if it's an HRA, the money stays with the employer. So I'd probably say 75% of the employers that we worked with did HRA and not HSA.
So how does it help HSA versus HRA from the insurance side?
It's the exact same. It's all it is that the deductible goes up from, let's say, $500 to $2,500, and then the employer is going to give money to the employees to spend. And so like Chili's is like a prime example of that. They gave a single employee, they gave him $800, and if it was a employee plus spouse or employee plus dependents, they gave him $1,600, and then they had a $3,000 deductible. So and they gave it to them in an HRA. If it's an HSA, they literally can just quit the company and then take the HSA money with them. But if it's an HRA, if they quit the company or they get fired, they can't take the money with them. But it still can only be used for healthcare expenses. You can't use it to buy shoes at Target or whatever. So it's still used, and it rolls over from year to year. So it incentivizes them to, if they can actually be more cost effective and use an independent imaging center with a $250 MRI as opposed to a hospital-based MRI for $2,500, then they're financially incentivized to do that because they're going to keep the money and have it roll over from year to year.
But HSAs are also independent, like in a retirement account. I mean, it's a bank.
That's right. So if it's an HSA, then you can actually use it for,
Yeah.
That's right. And interestingly, so here's what the rich companies would do. So here's what the fancy oil companies in Dallas would do, is they would give the employees like a $1,500 individual deductible, and then they would give them the full $1,500 on the HSA as an additional tax-free savings vehicle for retirement. So they essentially gave them a zero deductible plan. But they're like, look, if you can actually save your HSA money, then you can keep it for when you retire, and you can spend it tax-free on stuff that Medicare is not going to cover.
And the out-of-pocket costs have been capped again annually, and I think it's $14,000 this year for HSA. So out-of-pocket expenses based on national health care plan, sort of like the unknown. Not everybody realizes that you can't get those $150,000 bills because the law says your out-of-pocket expenses. I think it's $14,000 for an individual and $17,000 for family. So if your HSA is $14,000, you're kind of free, right? You're protected.
Well, yes and no. Of course, that's only for in-network. There's no.
Well, the network, they just repealed that, so who knows?
So you can get a $100,000 out-of-network bill. You can.
No, not anymore. They just the bill just passed. You can't do that.
Okay. Well, if it's brand new, but that was the original bill. There was not like that.
Brand new bill.
Any other questions? Anyone
So
else?
what do you think would be the most disruptive thing that's coming up? Because one of the things that Paula suggested, that there's remote work, there's telemedicine coverage. One of the things that I've seen on the rise is concierge medicine. And that's actually still goes towards direct pay rather than, or self-funded rather than, insurance is covering that. Do you feel like that would be a significant comeback? Because like even my brother, who works remotely for a California-based company from here in Dallas, I mean, he didn't choose a very, simple plan. And as a matter of fact, half of the time he's using Uber Docs to get his care, because at the end of the day, that's cheaper for him because, it practically matches up the deductible, and he gets the choice where he got the MRI done for $300 cash, which is, right. Again, like it's kind of at least savvy people who have some, information are actually not choosing the pathway. So what do you see the future of it? What is the overall, your vision that you see being in depth in this market? And then a comment on concierge medicine.
Yeah. So, I mean, and concierge, it kind of breaks into two categories. Like there's concierge medicine and then there's direct primary care. And really the distinction that's sometimes made is that the concierge medicines are typically charging, anywhere from $200 to $500 a month whereas direct primary care is typically $50 to $120 a month. And then the concierge medicine is still billing the insurance, whereas the direct primary care typically, or does not. So, and that, like, there's pros and cons to both models, but really, listen, direct primary care is 20,000 docs in America now. I mean, it totally works. So Atlas MD in Wichita, Kansas is probably the most advanced group. They've been doing it for almost 10 years now. And Colorado has more DPC docs than any state in America. They have a lot of them in Kansas. I actually have been helping just pro bono, but I've been helping a DPC practice in Dallas, because a lot of people will pay, typically it's $50 a month, and they'll just pay out of their own pocket. But really where the numbers start getting interesting for DPC groups is when they start contracting with the employer, and the employer pays the $50 a month. And I mean, I myself use DPC in a medical sharing ministry. I mean, I want nothing to do with health insurance. That's just my choice. It's got pros and cons as well. It's not for everybody. But at the end of the day, the insurance business is such a racket that I just don't want to be a part of it. I actually sleep better at night not being a part of it.
Speaking of which,
Maybe.
I didn't know you were in Dallas, and we should meet up to get some Indian food in Plano together.
Oh, that sounds great. My wife and I love it.
And I think we titled this talk wrong, in the business of benefits. Maybe it should be business of brackets or whatever.
I mean, it is.
The word
I mean,
extortion
it's so
should be
bad.
there.
And this is Dr. Marty McCary's point. Is that no, if we physicians don't do something about it, like, I mean, it's almost game over. Like it's the bottom of the ninth inning, and the game is almost over anyway. And no one is going to save us. Yeah. And like, I mean, we are getting killed. And if you think it's bad now, it's going to get 10 times worse. It's got a lot of room to go to get a lot worse, and it will.
Perfect. Hans has a last question.
Just on that note, Dr. Eric, I loved exactly what you said. So on that note, there's a comment, I think, by Buckminster Fuller and many wise people, is you don't really fix a system. You build a new system that makes the old one obsolete.
That's
so
exactly right.
I think the opportunity for the medical practitioners who have been actually sidelined from practicing medicine because of politicians and insurance companies are practicing medicine, it's time for them to do what you're calling to action is at the bottom of the night. Let's get yourself together and build what I would call now a true healthcare system, and rename what you have a sick care or disease care system, where people then know what they're paying for. Because at least from the German word, sick care insurance is sick care insurance. It's Krankenversicherung. The same way.
That's right.
It's not healthcare. That euphemism confuses even the consumer.
Oh, it's intentional. I mean, healthcare is filled with euphemisms that are intentionally meant to fool people. And that is, and listen, everybody on this call, frankly, you guys encourage me and inspire me, because like it is no one else is going to do it. There is no one else. No one's going to save us.
That's a great last word for all of us, which is, physicians, that is one of our motto, is that if physicians don't innovate, nobody else can, because they have the knowledge, they have the clinical knowledge, they need to get the business knowledge, they need to get the technology knowledge, or find people who can join them and then innovate. So thank you very much, Dr. Bricker.